All right, day 103 of the pandemic. 2 days of Ann Carson in a row. Yay! Back to chapter 16 and 17. I think that's right. It is the 21st of June. That means it is also the solstice and the longest day of the year, a major turning point in the seasons. Anyway, I'm not going to sit and ponder or wonder or wax something about that. I'll just jump into some Ann Carson. I'm going to read 2 chapters today, 16 and 17. Letters, and folded meanings. And, just pick up from here. Letters can mean letters of the alphabet and also epistles, in Greek as in English. Novels contain letters of both kinds and offer 2 different perspectives on the blind point of desire. Letters in the broad sense, that is to say the floating ruse of the novel as a written text, provide erotic tension on the level of the reading experience. There is a triangular circuit running from the writer to the reader to the characters in the story. When its circuit points connect, the difficult pleasure of paradox can be felt like an electrification. Letters in the narrower sense, epistles or written messages, function within the plots of various novels as a means of erotic subterfuge between characters. The effect is as you would expect: triangular, paradoxical, electric. In the numerous epistolary scenarios to be found in ancient novels, letters are never used to convey a direct declaration of love between lover and beloved. Letters stand oblique to the action and unfold a 3-cornered relation. A writes to C about B, or B reads a letter from C in the presence of A, and so on. When letters are read in novels, the immediate consequence is to inject paradox into lovers' emotions, pleasure and pain at once, and into their strategies, now obstructed by an absent presence. Consider a novel of Achilles Tatius, 3rd-4th century AD, called Cleitophon and Eusebi. The hero, who believes his beloved to be dead, is on the point of marrying another woman when he receives a letter from Eusebi. He interrupts the wedding to read Eusebi's letter, which brings her before the eyes of his soul, and starts a deep blush of shame on his cheek, as if he had been caught in the very act of adultery. Cleitophon immediately sits down to write a reply, dictated by Eros himself. Its opening lines neatly plot out the 3-point circuit connecting lover, beloved, and grammata in their standard angles. Hail, my lady Eusebi! I am miserable in the midst of joy because I see you present and at the same time absent in your letter. Cleitophon goes on in the letter to proclaim his love and entreat Eusebi to maintain her desire until he can unite with her. Written letters have the presence and authority of a third person who is witness, judge, and conduit of erotic charges. Letters are the mechanism of erotic paradox, at once connective and separative, painful and sweet. Letters construct the space of desire and kindle in those contradictory emotions that keep the lover alert to his own impasse. Letters arrest and complicate an existing 2-term situation by conjuring a third person who is not literally there, making suddenly visible the difference between what is, the actual and present erotic relation between Cleitophon and the other woman, and what could be, the ideal love of Cleitophon and Eusebi. Letters project the ideal on a screen of the actual. From within letters, Eros acts. A more hieratic example comes from Heliodorus' novel Aethiopica. Here the written text is not a letter but functions in the same way. Heliodorus' heroine is the white-skinned daughter born to the Black Queen of Ethiopia. The queen elects to abandon her child at birth rather than face the suspicious questions of her husband. And so Chariclea is exposed, wrapped in a tainia. No ordinary tainia, however. The queen inscribes it with a written text explaining the baby's history and white skin. As it happens, the infant is recruited by priests and reared at Delphi. Years pass, and the novel is in its 4th book before the novelist discloses to us the text on the tainia. The scene of its reading is reserved for a moment of erotic crisis. Chariclea is on the verge of dying of love for a certain Theagenes, when the Tania is read by a priest who hopes to save her life. The queen of Ethiopia speaks from the Tania. When I gave birth to you with your white skin radiant as light, an incongruous thing in an Ethiopian, I recognized the reason. You see, at the very moment when my husband penetrated me, I was staring at a painting of Andromeda. The painting showed her completely naked, just as Perseus was claiming her from the rock. Her likeness changed my seed, not luckily. Now here is an interesting triangle. Chariclea's desire for Theagenes unfolds backwards in time to include an aesthetic infidelity on the part of her mother. At the moment of coitus with her husband, the queen was thinking of something else. Her attention was caught by a different love affair, the mythical or ideal Eros of Perseus and Andromeda. The queen triangulated. It is not a simple triangle. Heliodorus is not a simple author. One Byzantine critic likened Heliodorus' narrative to a cluster of snakes with tails exposed, heads hidden. Moreover, Heliodorus warns us in advance that the queen's writing style is recondite, for she chooses to inscribe the Tania not in the Demotic Ethiopian alphabet, but in the royal letters, which resemble Egyptian hieratic script. The script is precious, and the meaning convolute. Nonetheless, the familiar components of an erotic triangle are recognizable. We see the king of Ethiopia reaching out to unite with his beloved wife. As he does so, an act of interception occurs. A third angle opens. By a shift of distance from far to near, from ideal to real, Perseus and Andromeda intercept the queen's glance and split her desire. Her imagination leaps, and as her imagination reaches out from actual husband to possible Perseus and Andromeda, something paradoxical happens. Chariclea. Chariclea is a paradox first on the level of fact, white from black, but also on the level of inference. Although in her own person she has not comprised her love for Theagenes, yet her perfect chastity, of which the white skin might have been thought a symbol, is now seen to have been colored white from before her birth by a momentary inconstancy in the mind of her mother. Whiteness is in her case a clue to impurity. You see the sense of this projected on its incongruence, as the Tania unfolds its tale. You contemplate that point of congruence, and the data of the reasoning seem to go askew in your mind. Can a painting change real flesh? Can a metaphor turn reality white? It is a delightful story, but unsatisfying as an exegesis, and your mind keeps reaching out for an answer. Each time you reach, conception shifts to interception. The black seed of Chariclea folds into the white skin of Andromeda and disappears. Placed at the blind point of that ruse, you feel delight and chagrin. Your mixed response is echoed by the reader within the novel. The priest, Calocyrus, who reads the Tania in hope of discovering how to save Chariclea, records his reaction. When I read these things, I recognized and marveled at the economy of the gods, and at the same time, I was filled with pleasure and pain. I found myself in quite a novel state of mind, weeping and rejoicing simultaneously. Let us be clear about the importance Heliodorus has given to reading and writing in this pivotal scene of his novel. Because of the way he has ordered his narrative, it is an act of reading that arrests and complicates the erotic situation between Chariclea and Theagenes by unfolding a third angle, the history of Chariclea's conception. At that third angle, the ruse of Eros operates. Paradox is generated. Emotions divide. From within a written text, Eros acts upon Calocyrus to create in him the state of mind typical of the readers of novels. Into that hieratic text, you reach for the meaning of Chariclea's white skin. The meaning shifts, changes, and eludes you, but you continue to long to pursue it, as if it were the beloved itself. We might compare with these Greek novels an anonymous Latin romance of the 5th or 6th century A.D., entitled History of Apollonius of Tyre. which relates the love of Apollonius for the daughter of the king of Pentapolis. Apollonius contrives to win the girl by becoming her tutor, and distracts her attention from rival suitors with the seductive power of letters themselves. When she falls in love, it is with Apollonius's learning, the novelist tells us. Rivals demand audience, but her father waves them away. Now is not a good time to press your suit, for my daughter is entirely absorbed with learning and is so in love with her studies that she lies ill in bed. King Antiochus thus employs the mechanism of letters to set up an erotic triangle. He invites each suitor to write down his name and dowry on a tablet, which he will forward to his daughter so that she may choose among them. Apollonius carries the tablet to her, and as she stands reading it before him, the familiar triangle of lover, beloved, and rivals in waiting is marked out. But this heroine is not unlettered herself. Displeased with the geometry of the triangle before her, the king's daughter reshuffles the angles. She writes Apollonius's name on the tablet and sends it back to her father with her seal. Literary critics of the novel are impatient with this letter-writing farce and pose plausible questions like, why does the king suggest the extraordinary and cumbersome procedure of writing letters to someone a few yards away? This reminds me of, why would we text somebody we are sitting a few feet from, or somebody who's upstairs and we're downstairs? Anyway, do the letters say anything that could not be said otherwise? Letters in this romance, as in Heliodorus' novel, bespeak their own power, a power to change reality erotically. It is letters that stir the fire of love in the king's daughter when she meets Apollonius. It is letters that pose the dilemma of absent presence for lover and beloved when she stands before Apollonius reading out the names of his rivals. It is letters that permit her to set the triangle of Eros on its head when she reaches through literary convention and rewrites the love scene to suit her own desire. This heroine understands the erotic art of letters as thoroughly as her own author. As feelingly as Montaigne's, her page makes love. There are two kinds of letters here, alphabet and epistle, and there are two kinds of love being made. As reader, you also are being wooed. Each one fits within the other. As letters of the alphabet compose lovers' epistles, so the love affair of Apollonius and the king's daughter composes the seductive action of this novel. But the page is taken over by the heroine. She commandeers the letters of a particular epistle and constructs for herself the love story that she wishes the novel to tell. By a shift of distance, she reaches from within the plot to triangulate that plot, inscribing Apollonius's name among his rivals, as if she herself were the novelist, as if letters themselves were an inescapably erotic form of understanding. When she makes that shift, the king's daughter does so by an act of imagination, reaching out from the actual, the list of suitors named on her father's tablet, to the possible, the unnamed suitor of her own preference. When she makes that shift, she takes over the letter-writing topos from her author, stepping from one literal plane of storytelling to a different plane. That shift is an act of letristic impertinence, and it delights you. At the same time, you may find the whole procedure of the scene extraordinary and cumbersome. But by your understanding of the letters as a novelistic topos, you are pulled into a kinetic, triangular, delightful, and disturbing action of Eros. As she writes her lover's name on the tablet, the king's daughter seduces you. Chapter 17, Folded Meanings. From the time of its earliest use, the technique of writing and reading was appreciated by the ancients as an apparatus of privacy or secrecy. All communication is, to some extent, public in a society without writing. Certainly, a message sent by herald and declaimed in the open air is a less private communique than a letter written for your eyes alone to read. Early readers and writers seem to have been intensely aware of this difference. There is an ancient riddle attributed to Sappho that expresses their attitude. What creature is it, Sappho asks, that is female in nature and hides in its womb unborn children who, although they are voiceless, speak to people far away? Sappho answers the riddle herself. The female creature is a letter, epistle, The unborn children are the letters of the alphabet it carries. And the letters, although they have no voices, speak to people far away, whomever they wish. But if some other person happens to be standing right beside the one who is reading, he will not hear. Letters make the absent present, and in an exclusive way, as if they were a private code from reader. Starting over that. Letters make the absent present, and in an exclusive way, as if they were a private code from writer to reader. The poet Archilochus applies to his own poetry the metaphor of a code, for he refers to himself, sending off a poem to someone, as a scutale, best known as a method employed by the Spartans for sending dispatches. The scutale was a staff or baton around which was wound a roll of leather. This was used as a code simply by wrapping it in a particular way, writing the message across the result, and then sending the unwound strip to the receiver, who rewound it on a similar staff to read it. Smart. Archilochus's metaphor understands the act of communication as an intimate collusion between the writer and reader. They compose a meaning between them by matching two halves of a text. It is a meaning not accessible to others. A well-known passage of Aeschylus's Suppliants also emphasizes the cryptographic possibilities of writing. Here, King Pelasgos, announcing a democratic decision viva voce, contrasts his own plain and public utterance with the furtive record of written texts. Such is the decree that issues from the city by unanimous popular vote. A bolt has been nailed straight through this, piercingly, so it stays fixed. It has not been written on tablets, nor sealed up in the folds of books, but you hear it plain from a free-speaking tongue. Words that are written, Pelasgos implies, may fold away and disappear. Only the spoken word is not sealed, folded, occult, or undemocratic. Now folding books and tablets were a reality in the ancient world. The most common writing surfaces for letters and messages in archaic and classical times was the deltos, a hinged wooden or wax tablet that was folded up on itself after inscription to conceal the words written within. The writer unfolded the tablet to confront a meaning meant only for him. The reader unfolded the tablet to confront a meaning meant only for him. Tablets of metal were also used for writing, especially by people consulting an oracle. For example, at Dodona, active as an oracular sanctuary from the 7th century, archaeologists have uncovered about 150 tablets on which were written questions for the oracle of Zeus. The great variety in handwriting, spelling, and grammar on the tablets indicates that each was inscribed by the inquirer himself. The tablets are of lead. Each is cut in a narrow band like a ribbon, with writing in 2 to 4 lines running the length of the band. In nearly every instance, the band, after writing, has been neatly folded several times so as to conceal the writing inside. This folding was evidently the reason for the shape of the lead ribbons, and also for the fact that the written inquiry was never carried over to the reverse of the band. The words you write on your lead at Dodona are a secret between you and the oracle of Zeus. Folded texts and private meanings were a literal fact for ancient readers. But there is a metaphorical reality here too. It is a metaphor as old as Homer, whose telling of the Bellerophon myth in Iliad 6 is the oldest story we have in Greek about letters, reading, and writing. Okay, more tomorrow, maybe. More soon, anyway.